So, continuation of chapter 1. I have had two masters. My first master's name was Anthony. I do not remember his first name. He was generally called Captain Anthony, a title which, I presume, he acquired by sailing on a craft on the Chesapeake Bay. He was not considered a rich slaveholder. He owned 2 or 3 farms and about 30 slaves. His farms and slaves were under the care of an overseer. The overseer's name was Plummer. Mr. Plummer was a miserable drunkard, a profane swearer, and a savage monster. I'm going to pause. This was that rule of 3 that I was talking about earlier. He is this and this and this. Again, this is just a way that Douglas uses language in order to get us really into a rhythm of what he is speaking, and just these rhetorical devices to get us to understand really what a bad person he is. I'm going to say 3 different things. Okay, I'm going to keep reading now. He always went armed with a cow skin and a heavy cudgel. Cow skins and cudgels, these are weapons. A cow skin is like a whip. A cudgel is like a stick. So he was constantly carrying around these things in order to abuse the slaves, the enslaved. I have known him to cut and slash the women's heads so horribly that even master would be enraged at his cruelty and would threaten to whip him if he did not mind himself. Master, however, was not a humane slaveholder. It required extraordinary barbarity on the part of the overseer to affect him. He was a cruel man, hardened by a long life of slaveholding. He would at times seem to take great pleasure in whipping a slave. I have often been awakened at the dawn of day by the most heart-rending shrieks of an own aunt of mine, whom he used to tie up to a joist and whip upon her naked back till she was literally covered with blood. No words, no tears, no prayers from his gory victim seemed to move his iron heart from its bloody purpose. The louder she screamed, the harder he whipped, and where the blood ran fastest, there he whipped longest. He would whip her to make her scream and whip her to make her hush, and not until overcome by fatigue would he cease to swing the blood-clotted cowskin. I remember the first time I ever witnessed this horrible exhibition. I was quite a child, but I well remember it. I shall never forget it whilst I remember anything. It was the first of a long series of outrages, of which I was doomed to be a witness and a participant. It struck me with an awful force. It was the blood-stained gate, the entrance to the hell of slavery, through which I was about to pass. It was a most terrible spectacle. I wish I could commit to paper the feeling with which I beheld it. I'm going to pause here. So we talked about last week this idea that as children, they didn't know that they were slaves, right? We're not born knowing these things. So there is an experience or something that happens to them that makes them realize that slavery is a thing and slavery is real. And this is slavery and I am a slave. And this is the thing that he's about to talk about related to his aunt. All right. So I'm going to read these last 2 paragraphs. This occurrence took place very soon after I went to live with my old master, and under the following circumstances. Aunt Hester went out one night, where or for what I do not know, and happened to be absent when my master desired her presence. He had ordered her not to go out evenings, and warned her that she must never let him catch her in the company with a young man who was paying attention to her, belonging to Colonel Lloyd. The young man's name was Ned Roberts, generally called Lloyd's Ned. Why master was so careful of her may be safely left to conjecture. Pause. Conjecture is like you make an educated guess. She was a woman of noble form and of graceful proportions, having very few equals and fewer superiors in personal appearance among the colored or white women of our neighborhood. Pause. So his master told his aunt she was never allowed to be caught in the presence of this guy, Ned. And he went to go find her at night. So what is being left unsaid here, right? You can figure it out. Paragraph 10. Aunt Hester had not only disobeyed his orders in going out, but had been found in the company with Lloyd's Ned, which circumstance I found, from what he said while whipping her, was the chief offense. Had he been a man of pure morals himself, he might have been thought interested in protecting the innocence of my aunt. But those who knew him will not suspect him of any such virtue. Before he commenced whipping Aunt Hester, he took her into the kitchen and stripped her from neck to waist, leaving her neck, shoulders, and back entirely naked. He then told her to cross her hands, calling her at the same time a blank blank. After crossing her hands, he tied them with a strong rope and led her to a stool under a large hook in the joist, put in for this purpose. He made her get upon the stool and tied her hands to the hook. She now stood fair for his infernal purpose. Her arms were stretched up at their full length, so that she stood upon her toes. He then said to her, "Now you, blank blank, I'll learn you to disobey my orders." And after rolling up his sleeves, he commenced to lay on the heavy cowskin. And soon the warm red blood, amid heart-rending shrieks from her and horrid oaths from him, came dripping to the floor. I was so terrified and horror-stricken at the sight that I hid myself in a closet and dared not venture out till long after the bloody transaction was over. I expected it would be my turn next. It was all new to me. I had never seen anything like it before. I had always lived with my grandmother on the outskirts of the plantation, where she was put to raise the children of the younger woman. I had therefore been, until now, out of the way of the bloody scenes that often occurred on the plantation.